The sun was slowly dipping behind the jagged peaks of the Arizona Canyon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. The air smelled of dry earth and sagebrush, carrying the quiet hum of insects settling down for the evening. In the narrow canyon below, a young Apache girl named Naheli moved carefully between the rocks, her bare feet making almost no sound on the dusty ground. She carried a small bundle of roots and herbs she had gathered for her mother, who had been weak with fever for days. Naheli had learned early in life that survival required both care and caution, and every movement she made was deliberate, shaped by years of watching the land and its dangers. Naheli's family lived in a small, hidden cluster of dwellings near the river. Their home was simple but protected, tucked behind high cliffs and thick trees that made it almost invisible to strangers. Life had never been easy, but it had been safe until recently. Settlers had started pushing into Apache lands, and with them came hunters, cowboys, and traders who rarely respected the territory or its people. Naheli had been warned to stay alert, and she always did. But tonight, she felt a tension in the air, a feeling that someone was watching from afar. A sound of hooves clattering on rock echoed through the canyon, sharp against the quiet of the evening. Naheli froze. Her heart beat faster, but her body remained still. She scanned the horizon and spotted a lone figure on horseback, moving slowly down the dusty path that led to the river. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. The horse looked tired but strong, its coat dusty from long travel. Naheli's instincts screamed danger. She had heard stories from her elders about cowboys. Some were traders, some hunters, but some were dangerous men who cared little for the lives of those they encountered. The cowboy dismounted near the river, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. He looked around, scanning the canyon as if he were claiming it for himself. Naheli gripped the bow she carried, an old but reliable weapon she had learned to use since childhood. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear of the bow, but from the knowledge that she faced a man who might be stronger and more experienced in conflict. She stayed low behind a cluster of rocks, watching as he moved closer to the water. Jared, the name Naheli would soon learn, was a man hardened by life on the trail. He had spent years moving across the frontier, often alone, relying on skill, wit, and sometimes force to survive. He had seen many towns, met many people, and had developed a habit of taking what he wanted when opportunity presented itself. When he spotted Naheli gathering water, he misread her youth and solitude as weakness. "You there?" he called in a rough voice, startling the birds into flight. "Come here." Naheli's heart raced. She didn't move. Instead, she held her ground behind the rocks, her eyes fixed on the cowboy. She knew speaking carelessly could give him an advantage. Her mind raced, thinking of how to protect herself and her family. Jared noticed the bow in her hand. Instead of being intimidated, he smirked. "That won't do you much good if you don't come with me," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You'll be mine, girl, or you'll sleep alone tonight." Naheli's grip on her bow tightened. She had been trained to face threats with calm, and now that training was being tested. She kept her voice steady, replying, "I have a family, and I will not leave them. You should turn back before you bring trouble to yourself." The cowboy laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the canyon. "Trouble? I don't think you understand. I make my own rules. You either come willingly, or—" He trailed off, letting the threat hang in the air. Naheli's mind raced. She couldn't fight him head-on. He was stronger, bigger, and more experienced with weapons. But she knew the land. She knew every rock, every hidden path, every place to hide or escape. She decided to use that knowledge to her advantage. "Follow me if you want," she said, speaking carefully. "But you'll get nothing but rocks and dust if you think to harm me." Intrigued and amused, Jared followed her as she led him along a narrow path that wound through the canyon. She moved quickly but carefully, stepping over loose stones and ducking under low-hanging branches. Jared followed with ease at first, confident that she couldn't outsmart him. He underestimated her knowledge of the terrain. Naheli led him to a ridge overlooking the canyon. From there, She could see the river bend, the small dwellings of her family hidden among the trees, and several narrow escape routes that only she knew. She stopped and pretended to look around, giving him a false sense of control. Jared dismounted and moved closer, trying to assert dominance. But Nahele was prepared. She had memorized every path, every ledge, and every point where she could hide or strike if necessary. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that made the canyon look like a maze of light and dark. Nahele knew that time was on her side. Darkness would help her, and she planned to use it wisely. She led Jared along a rocky trail, careful to make him think he was in control. He laughed and talked arrogantly, boasting about his years on the frontier, unaware that she was listening and learning from every word. Nahele's mind worked like a trap, setting one step ahead of the cowboy. She planned small diversions, pretending to stumble or retreat, making him believe he had the upper hand. Every movement was a lesson in patience and cleverness, and she felt a surge of confidence. The stories of her ancestors, their courage, and their cunning filled her mind, reminding her that strength did not always come from brute force. By the time the sun vanished completely, leaving the canyon in darkness, Nahele had successfully guided Jared far from her family's dwelling. She paused behind a large boulder, her chest heaving slightly, but her mind sharp and alert. Jared stopped as well, looking around, frustrated by the terrain and the darkness. He realized that the girl was not easily defeated. "I'll find a way," he said, his voice low and uncertain for the first time that evening. Nahele didn't answer. She only watched, silently, knowing that she had bought herself time and had proven that courage and intelligence could outmatch simple threats. Finally, she returned to her family under the cover of darkness. They were relieved to see her safe and listened intently as she explained what had happened. Nahele spoke calmly, avoiding panic. But every word carried the weight of the danger she had faced. Her family nodded, proud of her quick thinking and bravery. They knew the cowboy might return, but Nahele's courage and cleverness had given them a chance to stay safe. That night, Nahele lay on her mat, listening to the sounds of the canyon, alert but calm. She thought about the man she had faced and the lessons she had learned. The encounter had been terrifying. Yes. But it had also strengthened her resolve. She knew she could rely on her wits, her knowledge of the land, and the lessons passed down through generations to survive any threat that came her way. The canyon was quiet now, save for the distant howl of a coyote and the gentle rustle of leaves in the night wind. Nahele closed her eyes, but her mind stayed awake, planning, observing, and preparing. She had faced danger that evening, and had come out stronger, proving to herself that even in a world filled with threats, courage, intelligence, and determination could protect her and those she loved. And somewhere in the darkness, Jared rode away, muttering to himself, perhaps realizing that some challenges were not as simple as they seemed. Nahele's story, even in that first encounter, was becoming a tale of bravery and survival, one that would stay with her, guiding her through the challenges yet to come. The morning sun spilled over the canyon cliffs, casting golden light onto the rugged land. Birds chirped and insects buzzed, bringing life back to the quiet valley. Nahele woke early, alert as always. The previous day's encounter with the lone cowboy, Jared, weighed heavily on her mind. She knew he could return at any moment, and this time, she needed a stronger plan not just for herself, but for her family, who depended on her vigilance. Her mother, still weak from fever, sat on a woven mat near the fire. Nahele quietly brought her water and herbs, setting them down gently. Her younger brother peeked from behind a rock, curious about the sounds outside. "Did he come back?" he asked, his small voice trembling. Nahele shook her head, keeping calm. "Not yet. But we must be ready. I know he'll try again." She looked at her mother and brother, her face determined. "We have the advantage. We know the land. He doesn't." After a quick meal, Nahele's father joined her outside. He had been a strong warrior in his youth, and though age had slowed him, his eyes were sharp and calculating. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Remember, Strength is not just in the arms, Naheli. It is in the mind. Use the land. Use what you know, and he will not catch you off guard. Naheli nodded. She remembered every story of her ancestors who had survived against intruders, how they used rivers, cliffs, and forests as allies. Today, she would follow their example. By mid-morning, the sound of hooves echoed again. Jared had returned, moving cautiously this time. He had learned from yesterday that Nahela was clever, and he didn't want to make the same mistakes. Still, his determination to confront her was clear. Naheli observed him from the cover of a ridge, her heart steady but her mind racing. She noticed his horse's path, the way he scanned the terrain, the small pauses he took when unsure. She whispered instructions to her younger brother, who quietly moved behind her, holding a small bag of stones and pebbles. "If he comes too close, throw these to distract him," she said. "We are not hiding from him, we are guiding him." As Jared approached the river, Nahele stepped into the open briefly, showing herself. The sun glinted off her bow, catching his attention. "You again," he called, narrowing his eyes. "I thought I left you behind last night." Naheli's voice was calm but firm. "You did not leave me behind. You left me where I belong with my family." Her words carried confidence. Jared's face twisted with frustration. For the first time, he realized that intimidation would not work. This girl, small and young as she was, stood her ground. Nahele began moving slowly along the canyon path, deliberately choosing the route she knew best. Jared followed, attempting to close the distance. But the terrain was unforgiving. Loose rocks, sudden drops, and narrow trails made the cowboy struggle. His horse stumbled several times, forcing him to dismount and continue on foot. Nahele used the opportunity to slow him further. She paused at key points, pretending to glance at the cliffs and bushes, drawing him into areas where the land worked against him. Jared, arrogant and impatient, ignored the warning signs. Each step he took deeper into the canyon played into Nahele's plan. At one bend, Nahele stopped suddenly. "Wait here," she said, her voice steady. Jared halted, his breathing heavy from the climb. Nahele moved ahead to a small outcrop, peeking down at a hidden path below. She could see the river bend in the distance, the familiar trees and rocks that marked the area near her home. She had a clear escape route if needed, and she could lead him into a narrow passage where his size would work against him. Jared moved cautiously, frustrated by her control of the terrain. "Why are you making this difficult?" he demanded. Nahele didn't answer. She only moved with precision, guiding him like a shadow through the canyon. Every step was calculated, every pause deliberate. She wasn't trying to hurt him, only to outwit him. She remembered her father's words, "Strength is in the mind." And today, her mind was sharper than any threat he could pose. The canyon narrowed further, walls rising high on either side. Jared's confidence began to waver. His boots scraped against the stones, and his horse struggled to keep balance. Nahele stayed calm, knowing she was in control. She led him to a small ledge overlooking a drop, carefully showing herself in view but keeping a safe distance. The sun reflected off her bow, making her appear almost larger than she was. Jared stopped, catching his breath. He realized she had led him into a position where he could not easily maneuver. His pride, built over years of frontier life, was bruised. He looked at Nahele, finally recognizing that she was not just a frightened girl. She was clever, brave, and unyielding. Nahele spoke, her voice clear and firm. "You cannot take what does not belong to you. You may try, but the land is not yours. My family is not yours. You will find no victory here." For the first time, Jared felt uncertainty. He had always relied on force, on the assumption that others would give way. But this girl had used something stronger: intelligence, patience, and courage. Hours passed as the sun climbed higher, yet neither moved too quickly. Nahele led him carefully along winding paths, subtly guiding him into places where he struggled with footing and where the canyon itself slowed his progress. She was always one step ahead, quietly observing him, learning his habits, and anticipating his moves. Finally, they reached a point where the canyon opened slightly to a flat area with scattered bushes and rocks. Nahele paused, turning to face him fully. "You will go back now," she said firmly. "There is nothing here for you except frustration and danger. You will not succeed by threats or fear." Jared looked around, realizing how far he had been led. His pride and frustration boiled, but he could see she was right. Every step deeper into her world had been controlled by her. He had underestimated her completely. Slowly, he stepped back, muttering a quiet, grudging acknowledgement. For the first time that day, he did not feel like a conqueror. Nahele watched as he finally turned and retraced his steps out of the canyon, his horse stumbling occasionally over the rough terrain. She stayed hidden until he was completely gone, then breathed a sigh of relief. The danger had passed, at least for now. Returning to her family, Nahele explained what had happened with calm precision. They listened, amazed at her courage and ingenuity. Her father nodded with pride, recognizing that she had not only survived a dangerous encounter but had also outsmarted someone who thought he was stronger and more experienced. That evening, Nahele sat quietly near the river, the water reflecting the golden glow of sunset. She thought about what had happened and what she had learned. Courage, intelligence, and knowledge of the land had been her strongest allies. She knew the world outside her canyon could be dangerous, but she also knew she could face it with determination and cleverness. Her mother, still weak, came to sit beside her. "You were brave today," she said softly, placing a hand on Nahele's shoulder. "And smart. Your ancestors would be proud." Nahele smiled slightly, a quiet pride filling her chest. She realized that survival was not just about running or hiding, it was about understanding, planning, and facing challenges with confidence. As night fell, the canyon settled into its usual rhythm. Crickets sang, wind rustled through the trees, and the distant howl of a coyote echoed softly. Nahele lay down to rest, alert, but calm. She had faced a real threat and come through it alive, stronger, and wiser. The encounter with Jared would remain in her memory, not as a nightmare, but as a lesson in courage, cleverness, and the power of standing firm against those who underestimated her. Somewhere far away, Jared rode slowly, muttering to himself about the clever girl who had outwitted him. He had expected submission, but instead, he had found someone who refused to be intimidated. Nahele's story, even in these early encounters, was becoming one of quiet legend, one that would guide her through future challenges and inspire those who knew of her courage.